Okay, so as discussed earlier in the semester, several weeks ago, last time we met, this week you're just going to watch this video posted covering Chapter 7, Pricing Decisions, Customer Profitability, and Cost Management. This chapter should be a fairly pleasant change of pace for any of you that have struggled up to this point in the semester with some of the technical aspects of the accounting, because this is more of a conceptual chapter, um, and maybe a pleasant change of pace from having to work through the midterm if that was difficult for you. I know there was a wide range of experience there, as far as it's probably far too easy for some, and then I know some people struggled with it as well. So it was kind of all over the board there. But anyway, this chapter is mostly conceptual, so um, it should be fairly intuitive for most of you. So in addition to watching this PowerPoint slideshow presentation video, you should also complete the Chapter 7 My Accounting Lab homework in order to get the full participation points for this week. As was done previously in the semester, that My Accounting Lab will kind of double dip for points, where for Chapter 7 it will count as your participation points for this week, and also will count as extra credits, so you kind of get double points for it. So again, that's due at the end of the semester. But moving into the material for this week, we're going to first talk about pricing in business. Like the slide shows here, how companies price a product or service ultimately depends on the elements of demand and supply for it. We cover the three C's here that cover, and we'll talk specifically about them, but cover the influences, or some of the influences, on supply and demand. You've got customers, competitors, and costs. So generally, managers weigh customers, competitors, and costs differently when making price decisions. So it kind of varies depending on what type of market they're in. So managers at companies operating in perfectly competitive markets have no control over setting prices and must accept the price determined by a market consisting of many participants. So not a lot of control over what the prices can be priced at, otherwise someone would just go out and get a substitute product that's very similar. In less competitive markets, products are differentiated, and all three of those C's, customers, competitors, and costs, will affect and drive up and down the prices. As competition lessens even more, so we're going kind of from very highly competitive markets down to markets where you're in more of a monopoly setting, the key factor affecting pricing decisions is going to be the customer's willingness to pay based on the value that customers place on the product or service, not based on the costs or competitors. So as far as making long-run pricing decisions, managers prefer a stable price simply because it reduces the need for continuous monitoring of prices and expenses associated with that. It improves planning, and it builds long-term buyer-seller relationships. But to be able to charge that stable price and earn the target long-run return that they're expected to earn, managers have to have a good knowledge of and manage well the long-run costs of supplying products to customers. And of course, those long-run costs will include both future fixed and variable costs. So basically, there are two approaches for long-run pricing decisions. The market-based approach to pricing considers the customer requirements and tracks competitors' reactions to any movement in price of the company's product. Now, based on this price, managers control costs to earn a target return on investment. So under the cost-based approach, you would compute the price based on the cost to produce the product plus a target return on the investment. So you add a little margin in there. Companies operating in competitive markets use the market-based approach because they're not price setters, they're price takers. Companies operating in less competitive markets offer products or services that differ from each other and can either use the market-based or the cost-based approach as the starting point, and of course that would vary based on other decision-making issues, but that would be the starting point for pricing decisions. Now, companies operating in markets that are not competitive at all favor cost-based approaches, and that's because these companies don't really have to, they just don't really care about competitors' prices because they're price setters. This is more of a monopolistic type environment. So basically, if you want their product, you don't have any other option as to where you're going to get it. A target price is the estimated price for a product or service that potential customers are willing to pay. This estimate is based on an understanding of customers' perceived value for a product or service and how competitors will price competing products or services. Now, for a customer's perceived value, a company's sales and marketing organization, through close contact and interaction with customers, will identify customer needs and perceptions of product value. Now, for competitor analysis, this is also an essential aspect to setting reasonable or viable market prices. And when the company understands its competitors, it can more effectively evaluate how distinctive its own products and services will be in the market, and the price that because of those distinctions they will be able to charge based on what's out there already. So now we're going to take a look at the 5-step process of implementing target pricing. First, step 1, develop a product that satisfies the needs of the potential customers. This is kind of a restatement of the old marketing adage, find a need and fill it. However, in today's society, the company can play a part in actually creating that need instead of just finding it. So there's the first step. Step 2, choose a target price. This price should be based on research of competitors' products and what the customer is willing to pay. Step 3, derive a target cost per unit by subtracting target operating income per unit from the target price. Target operating income per unit is the operating income that a company aims to earn per unit of a product or service sold. Target cost per unit is the estimated long-run cost per unit of a product or service that enables the company to achieve its target operating income per unit when selling or when the company is selling at that target price. Step 4, you're going to perform cost analysis. So managers will analyze specific aspects of the product to target for cost reduction. In most cases, the target price will be less than the current price per unit, so the company must take steps to reduce the cost. Final step is to perform value engineering to achieve the target cost. So value engineering is kind of a systematic evaluation of all the aspects of the value chain with the objective of reducing costs and achieving a quality level that actually satisfies customers. Value engineering entails improving product designs, changing material specifications, and modifying process methods as needed. So the distinction between value-added and non-value-added costs. Several costs have both value-added and non-value-added components. When in doubt, some managers prefer to classify costs as non-value-added, so that's kind of the default, to focus organizational attention on cost reduction. The risk with this approach is that in an organization that does that, they may end up cutting some costs that are value-adding, and that can lead to poor or poorer customer experiences. So you see here the distinction between cost incurrence and locked-in costs, where cost incurrence just describes a resource when it is consumed, or basically the benefit is foregone to meet a specific objective. Whereas locked-in costs or designed-in costs are costs that have not yet been incurred but will be incurred in the future they're basically costs that will be incurred in the future based on decisions that have been made. So you've made the decision already, and because of that decision, you will incur those costs in the future. There are or can be some undesirable effects of value engineering. And some of those are listed here. Employees can be frustrated when their targets aren't achieved. There can be too many features added to accommodate the different wishes of the team. You can end up kind of paralysis by analysis there in that third bullet point. And then you have development of organizational conflicts, as basically the burden of cutting costs will invariably fall at different levels on different portions of the company's value chain. So these are some of the things that should be done when employing target costing efforts to try to avoid those pitfalls or be proactive, knowing that those are possibilities. So you should always encourage employee participation, celebrate small improvements toward achieving the target costs, always be customer focused, pay attention to schedules, and ensure that while they may not be equal, to set some type of cost-cutting targets for all value chain functions, just so one portion of the value chain doesn't view itself as being the one who's kind of incurring all of the cuts where costs need to be cut. So then we have the cost plus pricing approach. Basically, managers use the cost plus pricing formula as a starting point. The markup component, or basically the amount above and beyond the costs, is usually flexible depending on behavior of customers and competitors. So basically, the market conditions will ultimately dictate what the final price is. You may have a starting point, and then you have some wiggle room to go up or down as needed when you evaluate current conditions. So the markup percentages vary a great deal on the four costs bases. When determining a prospective selling price, a cost base such as variable manufacturing cost requires a higher markup percentage because the price needs to be set to earn a profit margin and to recover costs. Fixed manufacturing costs and all non-manufacturing costs that have been excluded from the original base. Full recovery of all costs of the product. The markup is designed to make a full recovery of all these costs. As far as price stability goes, this approach leads to price stability because it limits the ability and temptation of sales personnel to cut prices. And obviously, the fact that it's simple is a great advantage because it doesn't require detailed analyses of cost behavior patterns in order to employ it. So, as far as understanding customer profitability analysis, managers use this information to ensure that customers making large contributions to the operating income of a company receive a high level of attention from the company, and that loss-making customers do not end up using more resources than the revenues that they provide. Now, two variables can be identified to explain revenue differences across customers. One of those would be the quantity purchased, and then another would be the amount of discount received. So obviously the discount is going to be receiving the product for a price lesser than the price it's being sold or listed at, to encourage customers that receive the discount to purchase more. As far as what the elements of customer profitability are, these are just listed out here. You've got customer revenues, obviously the amount of money that comes in from the customers, and then that has to be balanced against the cost of acquiring, serving, and retaining those customers, kind of just a cost-benefit analysis. So this is a list of the 5 categories of indirect costs within the customer cost hierarchy. Customer output unit level costs are costs of activities to sell each unit to a customer. Product handling is one of those costs. Customer batch level costs are costs of activities related to a group of units sold to a customer. Costs incurred to process or deliver an order are examples of those types of costs. Customer sustaining costs are costs of activities to support individual customers regardless of the amount ordered by that customer. Sales visits to customers or costs of a display at the customer site are 2 different examples of what some of those costs might be. Distribution channel costs are costs of activities related to a particular distribution channel rather than to each unit or batch of product or specific customer. So an example of that would be the salary of a distribution manager, because it just fits in within that category, because it's at the distribution channel level. Corporate sustaining costs are the costs of activities that cannot be traced to individual customers or distribution channels. So an example of that would obviously be top management costs, salary, bonuses, that kind of thing, and just the general administration costs of the company, HR, that type of thing as well. So just to look at customer profitability profiles, these can be used or useful for managers as tools, and you can kind of create a rank order of how your customers rank based on those other factors that we looked at. So here's some other factors to consider when allocating resources among customers. For the likelihood of customer retention, obviously the more likely a customer will continue to do business with the company, the more value that customer adds to the company. Depending on lots of different factors, obviously customers are going to differ with respect to the amount of loyalty they have to the company and the amount that they're willing to shop around for a better deal or better service. For potential for sales growth, you want to ask, is there a high likelihood that the customer's industry and sales will continue to grow? If it's likely to grow, obviously you're going to look at the current value and the possibility of the future value, including that growth for that customer. For long run customer profitability, what does, looking not necessarily into the near term, but what does management think the future holds for the company in its relationship with this customer? Then you want to look at increases in overall demand from having well-known customers. So customers with established reputations help generate sales from other customers through product endorsement, whether that is explicit or implicit just based on their usage of the product. And then you have ability to learn from customers. Obviously, customers who provide ideas about new products or constructive feedback on ways to improve existing products can become especially valuable because they add that extra value for future products. Now, as far as the product life cycle goes, there are several features that make life cycle budgeting particularly important. The development period for research and development is long and costly. These costs have to be recovered over the lifespan of the product. Now, there are many costs that are locked in at the research and development and design stages. Poorly designed products require higher marketing and customer service costs. Next, we have a couple or a few considerations for pricing decisions. Now, price discrimination is the practice of charging different prices to different customers for the same product or service. Um, Another example of a pricing decision um, based on factors other than costs deals with capacity constraints. Peak load pricing is the practice of charging a higher price for the same product or service when the demand approaches physical capacity to produce the product or service. And you see kind of examples of that sometimes with like the power grid, and sometimes power companies have been known to charge a higher price for high usage hours because that's when uh, they're at their max capacity to produce that power. Then you have international pricing, and it's a situation where prices charged in each country vary much more than the cost of delivering the product to each country. Now, these price differences arise because of differences in the purchasing power of consumers in different countries, which is usually based on the currency differences within the countries, and government restrictions that may limit the prices that companies can charge. Now, when setting prices, there are some legal considerations to consider. Companies are not entirely free to set prices that they choose. Um, there's two key features of these laws that need to be considered. Price discrimination is permissible if differences in prices can be justified by differences in costs, and price discrimination is illegal only if the intent is to lessen or prevent competition. So that moves us into the purpose of antitrust laws, which that's a part of that purpose. Um, and you have, these are some of the more famous and larger antitrust acts. You got the Sherman Act, the Clayton Act, the Federal Trade Commission Act, and the Robinson-Patman Act. Um, those are kind of what make up most of the legislation with respect to antitrust laws in the United States. Now, a principal component of these acts is the prohibition of predatory pricing, which is deliberately setting prices below cost in an effort to drive competitors out of business and restrict supply. Then, after the other competitors are gone, the company would act or be able to act as more of a monopoly and raise prices to a point where they'll recover what they lost when they lowered the price, and then again basically restrict the amount of competition that they have. Another prohibited practice is or within antitrust laws is called dumping. And this happens when a non-US company sells a product in the United States at a price below market value in the country where it is produced. Now, the third highlighted practice here that's covered by antitrust legislation is called collusive pricing. And this is basically when two or more entities within a market get together and fix prices at a certain level. So this usually happens when competitors will get together and say, hey, we have to kind of look at each other for pricing, otherwise, we lose competition to each other. But what if we arbitrarily set prices or set a floor where we're not going to lower prices below a certain amount? That way, regardless of how we interplay and customers go between the two of us, no matter what, for every customer that we get, they're going to have to pay this arbitrarily high price. And obviously that's restrictive of free trade and competitive pricing, and that's one of the reasons it's covered by these antitrust laws. Okay, so that's the end of the main components from the chapter. Again, I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to go ahead and read the chapter, familiarize yourself with it, do the My Accounting Lab problems, and get your credit for the week. And I will see you next Thursday.